Hey everybody, Corey here. So I'm here today to introduce our Fortnight Frights readathon wrap-up. I sat down on Zoom with Shanley and Sally and we have gone through some of the books that we read during the Fortnight Frights. I hope you enjoy.
Hello! So we are back with our Fortnight Frights wrap-up. I know we had quite a successful couple weeks, or at least I did. And we're each going to go through kind of our top 3-ish books that we read, but I know at least Shanley and I read significantly more than that. And we'll make sure, even if we don't talk about the books we read in this video, I'll make sure to list down below everything that we did read. All right, so before we get in specifically, how did you guys do on the bingo board, shall we say?
I could have done... Okay, well, listen, I did good. I did get a bingo. I did. But I was one away from 2 bingos, so I'm disappointed in myself. But I did good. I read 7.5-ish books.
That's awesome.
So I did pretty damn good.
Yeah. Proud of that.
Thank you.
And which bingo did you get?
It's the one on the far right. Short story, Gothic novel.
Nice.
LGBTQ plus author and Black author.
Nice. What about you, Sally?
If you're being very generous, I want to give me partial credit for a book that I am not done yet. I got the bingo across the bottom. If you're being strict, then I did not get any bingos. I completed 2 books and I started another, which I do intend to finish, but I didn't quite live up to what I hoped to get through. Work got in the way.
Darn you.
Darn work.
Stupid work. Oh, we've been so busy lately.
Yeah, it's been a wild month.
I did this. So,
of course you did. Of course you did. Why am I surprised?
I read a different book for each of the prompts. So I've read 16 books in 14 days. But 4 of them were graphic novels. There was a couple novellas. It wasn't 16 full-length novels.
Hey, graphic novels are full-length novels. Don't knock yourself short.
Okay, that's true. But so I've read some really great things. Don't have time in this video to go through each and every one of them. But we're going to highlight a few favorites. Cool. I think through this. All right, so I'm going to go through my first one maybe, and then we'll just kind of trade off and talk about what we read.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about, let's just knock it right off the top, is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. And this could count for several of the prompts. I read it for a horror comic, but it could be a translated piece written by an Asian author. Is graphic novel on here? Yeah, probably.
Horror comic is on there.
Horror comic. So it could have been several things. But yeah, so this was every bit as disturbing as I wanted it to be. It's a weird thing to say. But this is about a town that gets infected with spirals. Which sounds weird, but people start becoming obsessed with spirals. I want to find, so it just kind of kicks off right off the bat, very, very little into the comic, and then somebody turns into a spiral. So that's a man.
Sure.
And it just is all sorts of different little short stories about. I never really thought that spirals should be so creepy. I used to think snails are cute. Snails are no longer cute. This humans start turning into snails and with their spirally shells, and it's terrifying, and nobody can leave the town, and if you enter the town you can't then leave again. It's so disturbing. My friend read it at the same time as I did on her e-reader, and she texted me immediately when she finished, and she said, I've deleted it off my e-reader. I don't want this in my house. And so I was like, oh, so when you come stay with me next time, this might just show up next to your head, will you?
Just be next to her bed.
Hide it under the bed she's sleeping in.
No, please put it under a pillow.
So,
But yeah, it's terrifying. And I actually read another Junji Ito that I'm not going to talk about during this readathon. It's so disturbing, but it's like also so satisfying to read. Like,
I would really like to borrow that one. It sounds so strange and intriguing.
It's very weird and like unlike anything I've ever read before. But it was just, it's like it's like a car crash. It's like fascinating. Like you just can't stop looking at it. So loved it.
Okay. Copy that.
All right, who wants to talk about their next read?
I'll go next.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. This is actually not the one I read. I gave Corey back the first one, but I read Tokyo Ghoul #1. So this also satisfies a number of, I think I've got 4 on the chart. It is with a book with an undead character, written by an Asian author, translated, and horror comic. So I covered a lot of bases with this one.
Yeah,
So I only read the first. Corey very kindly lent me #1 and 2. I will be reading #2, but as we briefly talked about already, didn't love #1, but it was like doing a lot of setup. So I have a feeling that like now that we sort of like have the groundwork laid down for the world, I think I'll probably like #2 better. But this was the first manga comic I've ever read. Is this manga?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. This is the first manga I've ever read. It definitely took me a minute to adjust reading in the other direction. I kept forgetting that you weren't just turning the pages the other direction. You actually had to read right to left in the panels. So there was a few conversations that I read backwards, but I had the hang of it by the end. And yeah, it was super creepy. I did enjoy it, and not so creepy that I don't want to read the one that you just talked about.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, not a 5-star read for me, but one that I'm glad I read.
Yeah, that's how I felt about the first volume too, being like,
yeah,
I know it's doing some setup here. I recognize that. I feel it's going to be good from here on out, kind of thing.
I did find parts of it a bit repetitive. I was like, I get it, you're a ghoul. Maybe you could have combined this with book #2 as well. But yeah, it was fun.
I don't think Tokyo Ghoul does this, but some manga like reminds you to read the other way. Like sometimes be like, you're reading this way. Like,
no, they didn't have that in this one. It would have been nice to have some sort of like wayfinders, but no such luck in this one.
All right.
Nice, cool. Shanley, what about you?
Okay, first one I'm going to talk about is also the first one I think I brought up in our other video, and that's Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fantastic and creepy and kind of gross at the end. Like, surprisingly gross, because what you think the big Gothic reveal is going to be, it ain't what you think it's going to be, and it's weird. But, like, basic premise of it is a woman named Noemi goes off to see her cousin who's married this, like, fancy, rich British lord outside of Mexico City, and she goes to stay with her cousin because her cousin wrote them a letter that's like thoroughly disturbing and very weird. And so she goes, and this house is like super decrepit and old and, you know, Gothic. And things just go from there because nothing is what you think it is and everything is crazy and it was bonkers. Really enjoyed it, and it has a lot of really interesting conversations about racism and eugenics of all things.
Oh.
It blended itself very well, and it made perfect sense when you're reading it. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. That one knocked a couple of challenges for me, but yeah, highly recommend it. It does live up to the big hype that I've been seeing.
Cool.
And Corey, you read it too, right?
Yeah, I also read it during this couple weeks, and it's like disgusting. Again, it's like how I felt about Uzumaki as well. It's like, it's disgusting but fascinating. I feel like the first half is like almost a different book from the second half.
Yeah.
Like in a way that works. Like you're it's part of this mystery, and then you're like, okay, what? Like, excuse me.
There's definitely like a shift in tone, but it works really well. But yeah, it gets weird and it gets creepy.
Yeah, it's great.
And it goes into areas that I think a lot of gothic novels that were written like during like the actual like Gothic period were kind of like either unwilling, afraid to, or was just sort of like mentioned in like the margins, like the kind of violence that happens towards women. This book, because it's modern, it's set like, I don't know, 1940s, 50s in Mexico. I'm actually not 100% sure the era. I mean, there were cars and stuff, but it also seemed very old.
Did it? I thought it was more... It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, but it was like modern written, set in the past as a Gothic. So it does go there. It does go into those areas, and it's uncomfortable, but it's also like, it's part of the story, and it's part of like the genre. And it goes into these areas where like other Gothic novels just couldn't for the time when it was written. So heads up on that to everyone. But if you want like a good Gothic, like Mexican Gothic is it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to read it.
Well, I have it, Sally, so if you want another one, you need to borrow.
Okay.
That
is my ever-growing pile.
Yeah. So my next one is probably one of the best anthologies I've ever read. I am like really hit and miss with anthologies, and I think that makes sense for a lot of people because it's all for anthologies written by different authors. Like, you're not going to love every story. It's, it's different authors, it's different writing. But for this one, I genuinely liked every single story, and that's the one they have a hard time seeing, and that's Taaqtumi. And these are all creepy short stories written by authors. And every single one was unsettling or scary or fascinating. And I wasn't like bored reading any of them. And there's like a wide variety of genre. There's like some more science fiction leaning, some more contemporary leaning, some more paranormal leaning. And they're fantastic. I read like one or two a day, and I'm obsessed. It's so good. It's definitely an anthology that I wish you could see.
You can see the Raven better this time.
Yeah, a little. It's amazing. But it's just fantastic. I'm just gonna read a few sentences off the back so you kind of get like the vibe of where the stories go. A family clinging to survival out on the tundra after a vicious zombie virus. A door that beckons, waiting to unleash the terror behind it. A post-apocalyptic community in the far north where things aren't quite what they seem. Chilling tales from award-winning authors.
Sounds like my jam.
It's so good. I'm so happy I read it, and I'll bring it to the office if anybody else wants to read it too.
Dibs.
So I was just like really pleasantly surprised. Like, I always go into short story compilations like feeling a little bit on the fence if I'm gonna like it or not, and that one was fantastic.
So the real winner for me in this read along was Empire of Wild by Cherie Dimaline. Like I said in our last video, I was just coming off reading The Marrow Thieves by her, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So this one, same author, I believe she wrote it afterwards. You may want to correct me on that. It is not YA, it is firmly an adult book, but it was amazing. I really devoured this one. I don't want to give anything away because it was cool going into it blind and just like letting it unfold in front of me. But in very broad plot strokes, the main character, who is a Métis woman in Ontario, her husband has been missing for like coming up on a year. It's like 11 months and 20 odd days. They had a fight one night. They didn't, you know, it was like one of their only fights ever, and he was kind of like going out hunting, just kind of stormed out, but like was supposed to come back and then never came back. There hasn't been a trace of him, and she's sort of been unraveling over this year and just desperately trying to find him, and her family and the community has sort of gotten to the point where they're like, I think he just left you, like, sorry, but I think he left you, and she refuses to accept that. And then along with that, you learn a lot about the Indigenous community in Ontario, or, you know, Canada at large. And in her particular community, there is the myth of something called a rogaroo, which is like a wolf man monster who takes people. And that definitely plays a part in the story, but it did not happen in the way that I thought it would. And it was amazing. There was religious stuff and really interesting Indigenous stuff, and I highly recommend it. Remember that it is an adult book, but yeah, particularly if you've read The Marrow Thieves and you like that, just definitely read this. I loved it.
Dang. I mean, I remember loving The Marrow Thieves, and yeah, I've been meaning to read this one for a while now.
Yeah, I read it like over probably 3 days. It wasn't super long, but fun reading things on my ebooks though. I don't actually know how long things are anymore. It's just, I'm just done all of a sudden. And I'm like, that could have been 100 pages. That could have been 400 pages. Who knows? For the bingo board, this almost got me the whole bottom row. It is a piece of dark fantasy. It was written by an Indigenous author, and it is a book with a green cover, depending on the edition that you get. So I'm gonna call it 3 of the bingo challenges there.
Nice.
So the next one I'm choosing. So you know how I was saying in the last video that I was really struggling to find a horror comic, which is ridiculous because I love horror comics, but I guess also makes sense because I read a lot of them just already. So I read one, and it was fine. It was okay. But then my friend surprised me by finding this, which is a zine by Emily Carroll.
Oh,
right? It's called And by the Bed. It is scary as hell. I read it. It's like 32 pages. But it scared the bejesus out of me. I had been sleeping after this. She's just so good at what she does. And like, I don't want to tell you anything about it, except it's like, it's very, like, already, like, you start it and it's very disconcerting because it just tells you it's a story about this like thing that happened in the past about this woman who died. Her name was Anne by the Bed. But the whole narrative doesn't play out like a straightforward narrative. It kind of jumps around. Like, you see glimpses of her actual life, but then scholars are talking about it, but then someone's talking about it like it's a ghost story, and then someone else is reading a newspaper article about it. And it jumps around quite a lot, and it's really disturbing. And like the last bit just kind of clinches it, and it just scares you. And it was so good. And also it's a story by Emily Carroll that I hadn't read yet, when I thought I had read them all. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's awesome. What a fun surprise.
It was such a surprise. He was like, oh, I accidentally got 2 of these. Do you want one? And I just kind of like lost it and like lunged across the room. But yeah, there we go. So And by the Bed, which is, it's part of this like Frontier thing, which was just a collection of, as far as I can tell, indie comics writers sort of putting out some zines from like 2014. But there she blows. She was amazing.
Cool.
Neat. Good find. All right, so the last one that I'm going to talk about in this video, I think, is The Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a novella that was super dark. Well, humorous, kind of, in a way. But basically, it's the story of this group of friends. It's kind of their last hurrah, and they have this mannequin that they found like several years back, and they used to like play with this mannequin all the time and like bring it places, and like it was kind of like a joke within the group that like this mannequin was like one of them. And then they kind of grew up a little bit, and the mannequin kind of has just been like in a shed for a couple years, and they decide in the last prank of the summer, senior year, they are going to bring the mannequin into the movie theater where one of them works and just like prank with one of their friends with this creepy mannequin sitting in the middle of the movie theater. Until our main character, Sawyer, sees the mannequin get up and walk out of the theater. And basically the mannequin is set on getting revenge because these were his friends and they just left him in a shed for a couple of years. So he's going to kill all of their friends and all of their friends' families.
Oh, God.
Sure. Why not?
And it takes a turn that I didn't expect. It's very, very well written and clever, and it goes places that I was just very surprised by. But yeah, it's weird, it's creepy, it's quite graphic. Again, these are all adult books, but it's wonderful. But also, mannequins are inherently creepy. So, but it's really fast to read. And Stephen Graham Jones is also an Indigenous author.
Cool.
Yeah, loved it.
Was one of his books also one of the Fortnight Frights read-alongs?
Yeah, The Only Good Indians.
Right. Right.
But this is the first book I've read by Stephen Graham Jones, and apparently he has like quite the backlist. Like there's a lot.
Oh wow.
So this is probably a weird place to start, but it was great. Yeah, really enjoyed it. It definitely like perfect spooky Halloween book.
The only other one that I had the opportunity to start, but I am not very far into it yet, is Hoodoo by Ronald L. Smith, which is a middle grade novel. And not a ton to report yet because I'm not very far into it. But like I said, I do plan on finishing it. And from the couple of chapters that I have had a chance to read, it's great so far. Had I finished it, it would have gotten me the bottom right-hand corner. Ronald L. Smith is a Black author, but I'm not quite there yet. Yeah. I started.
Exactly, and you'll finish it.
And I will finish it, yeah. I think I have to renew it from the library because technically it expires tomorrow. But I will get my request back in and re-download it because it's that perfect middle grade spooky so far. Yeah, I kind of wish that I had like it. I wish this was a month long because I would have loved to read more middle grade stuff along with adult. But yeah, next year, and I will finish this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the same. There's a lot of middle grade horror that I wanted to get out that just wasn't available during this small period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another one called Hide and Seeker that looks so good, which I'm still going to try to get out just for my own sake. But it looks so good, and I know it's new, but I couldn't get it.
It really rings a bell, and I'm trying to picture the cover.
It's like it's a really creepy kid with like doing this, and like there's this like big thing hovering up around.
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
So I really want to read that one, but alas.
There's a lot of really awesome spooky middle grade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the one that I'm going to briefly touch on, which is the last one I'll talk about right now. It's the short story that I read from a collection by Nalo Hopkinson titled Skinfolk. And the story in particular that I read a couple of them. There was one that I read that was good, but I don't think I got it because then I looked it up later and I realized it was connected to a previous work that Nalo had published, which I haven't read. So I didn't quite get it. And I was like, it was good, but anyway. But the one I really liked was called Greedy Choke Puppy. I'm not going to give too much away because there is like a twist that happens in it. And it's only like 20-30 pages long in Skinfolk. But it touches on like greed and folklore creepiness with like vampirism.
Ooh.
It gets all the good stuff. And since Nalo Hopkinson is a Jamaican author, she actually does mention Jumbies in it as well, which was
cool.
You know, The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste,
Yeah.
also a great book. So it was really just cool seeing that folklore sort of popping up again in something else.
Yeah. Neat.
Right on. Well, I think that was a very successful couple weeks for us.
Mhm.
I also read so many other incredible books, but this video would be so long. Through all of them. I think first, at least for myself, I would definitely be into doing this again next year if
Oh yeah, big
JB
time.
from the Artisan Geek runs it again, because it's such a fantastic readathon. So much fun. Make sure you check out the Artisan Geek as well. The channel is great. The website's great. It's just so much resources and so entertaining. Fantastic.
Videos are so much fun, and she like put really good effort into the costumes. Her costumes were
It's fantastic.
fantastic.
So thanks to her for that, because great times. We love a good spooky readathon.
It's our favorite time of year, at least mine.
Favorite time. As of filming this, it's now November 3rd, and I'm sad that no October is over.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw it back to in studio Corey to wrap up the end of the video officially. But thanks for joining me, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Alright everyone, so that was our Fortnight Frights wrap up. I'll leave a list of all of the books that we read during the readathon, not just the ones we talked about in this video, in the description down below if you're curious. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Happy reading and thanks for being awesome. Bye!